Our guest this morning is Dr. Tunji Abayomi, constitutional lawyer. He's with us via our Abuja studio. A fine morning to you, Dr. Abayomi.
In Nigerians.
Okay.
Or good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah. Indeed. So, well, here we are. The Constitution was largely in play yesterday as the lordships in the Supreme Court were reading the ruling to us. Of course, we were leaning on it. There are a number of things that they kept on referring to the Constitution. Well, there's a sense in which it depends on what side of the divide one was on. There are those who are going to say that none of this was surprising to them because, of course, just like the lawyers of the president, the positions that they had canvassed was indeed what was handed down. And were there any surprises at all for you, to ask an almost obvious question, Dr. Tunji Abayomi?
The only surprise was the length of the judgment.
Okay, they were very thorough.
It was quite brief. And more interesting was also the decision not to extensively review the petition or the appeal of Labour Party and then Peter Obi.
Indeed.
Essentially, as the court said, mutandis, or, mutanti, so to say. That is generally is almost the same as what was decided in the case of PDP. Otherwise, virtually everything was predicted in this station. You will recall, I had said that the Supreme Court was going to decide almost exactly as it decided. I think if you have a good knowledge of law, you could predict the decision of an objective and impartial jurist. And that was what happened yesterday.
Indeed. And the last-ditch effort of Waziri Adamawa Atiku Abubakar to introduce evidence, that was clearly pronounced upon, and that it was a waste of time, quite frankly.
Well, this issue of evidence was charged effectively at the tribunal. I'm talking of the Court of Appeal, yes, the Court of First Instance, in presidential election cases. You will recall that that issue also has been discussed extensively in your station. Election is largely at the polling unit. Whatever happens, the regularity or irregularity of election is decided by that at that polling unit. Now we are talking of a situation where parties have agents. These agents were present. And according to the Electoral Act, election is counted, announced, endorsed, not just by the officials and security agents, but also agents of parties. And this endorsement is inputted into a statutory form and given to agents and security officials. Now you move out of that, you're complaining outside that environment. That's the position of the Court of Appeal, sitting as a tribunal, as well as the Supreme Court. If we are going to invalidate election, you've got to show that at that polling unit, there are problems that make the election unsustainable. And this issue of election, I think it's important for us to understand it. To conduct election all over this country is a huge endeavor by any nation. And if you are now going to invalidate it, the law recognizes the huge or the hugeness of the endeavor. So it prescribes strongly that to be able to invalidate that election is just beyond casuality. It's not just a question of just bringing a document that a man didn't have a certificate. A man who had 18 A's, 10 B's. I know how much I struggled in the university, in the 3 degrees I have in America, to have A. And now you've got somebody who went to Chicago State University and got 18 A's. Now you're talking of 18 professors gave him A's. And now you bring a casual document to say that elections should be invalidated on the basis of that. I'm sorry. It's an exercise in futility like I predicted before. And here we need to salute the president for demonstrating leadership accommodation and tolerance. Because all the attacks, disrespectful designation, disrespectful disqualification, name calling, all of that, he never said anything, never responded. You can imagine. He was not even agitated. But what should agitate him? If you go to the university and you did well, came out on top, and somebody said, you didn't go to the university. I mean, it's sufficient to provoke. It's highly provocative. But he maintained what Rudyard Kipling calls the common touch. And in this regard, we need to salute and commend him.
Indeed. There were the other point that was decisively addressed was the whole, I don't know whether to call it a shenanigan or not, this whole matter about 25% in the Federal Capital Territory, thereby converting the Federal Capital Territory into a super state that, quite frankly, eminent lawyers commented upon before the handing down now by their lordships that this is not an issue at all. And so it's now, that time, all the energy, all the intellectual energy that was dispensed on that particular question, well, now it has firmly been pronounced upon, and nobody is going to dare bring that up again, that if you don't win 25% in the Federal Capital Territory, then you cannot really be the president.
So it was such a simplistic, highly simplistic, and almost embarrassingly simplistic. To use the words of Justice Okoro, sounds like a friendly joke. Like it was said, so if a man wins in 30 states and he has the majority of the votes, he cannot become president of Nigeria if he does not win in Federal Capital Territory. Like I said, in your station here a while ago, I was a lawyer, one of the lawyers, in Wazir Ibrahim against Shagari's case in 1983. This issue was already decided as at that time. Mm-hmm. In 1983, we had 19 states. And the same provision in this constitution was in that 1979 constitution, that Abuja is to be treated like a state. Now we had at that time 19 states and Federal Capital Territory. And in that, Supreme Court in that case said, you become president if you win in 13 states. If you take a quarter, the 2/3 of all the states of 19 states, is less than 13. I think it's 12 something. But if you take 2/3 of 20, it will be 13.2. But because 0.2 is less than 5. You go to the whole, and that is 13. So it was already clear. In this case, it's exactly the same thing. You need 25 states. And that means that Abuja, like Abuja was considered to be a state, in 1983, Waziri Ibrahim against Shagari is also a state. And like I said again, I mean, I couldn't understand senior lawyers talking about this. It's really, really embarrassing. Why were you focusing so much on Federal Capital Territory? That's a nomenclature. The interest and the preoccupation of the Constitution is to account for the voters in the Federal Capital Territory. The Supreme Court didn't go further into this issue intensely. The truth of the matter is that federal government has no voters. Only states and local governments have voters. You calculate winnability by taking into consideration votes cast in states and local governments, not in federal territory as such. In order to account for the votes of federal territory, the ingenuity and brilliance of the makers of the Constitution said, okay, the only way we can account for that is to make Federal Capital Territory a state in order to account for the votes of the state. But it is a state that is not equal to other states. It's an unequal state. That's why it says it has to be treated like a state. Because it is an unequal state, the word "and" had to be used. And you cannot treat states unequally. So, the voters in Federal Capital Territory, or this state, you may call it Federal Capital Territory state, cannot be higher than the votes in my state, Ondo. The voters, the value of the voters in Federal Capital Territory state, quote unquote, cannot be higher than the value of the voters in my state, Ondo state. And that's the point the Supreme Court was making.
Yeah.
The preoccupation, the nomenclature is a non sequitur. It means nothing at all. Mm-hmm. And that matter is settled.
It is. It is now settled. So nobody is going to raise that kind of an issue again. As Justice Okoro remarked when he was reading the lead judgment, that if the framers of the Constitution had intended the interpretation being given by some sectors of the law, it would have been very clear about that matter. It wouldn't have been what it was that gave rise to all of that discussion and all of that power, intellectual power being expended on it. They would have been very, very clear that it was intended that without the 25% there, the matters followed the way that side of the divide was proposing. But Justice Okoro sort of sorted that out. So now it will never come up again because people now know, both lawyers, both learned and non-learned people. In the case of, talking about the whole thing, the case of LP and Peter Gregory Obi, they didn't spend too much time on that, as you had observed earlier, because there was nothing in it, I think was the virtual conclusion. There was absolutely nothing in it that had not been covered by Atiku's appeal.
The principal issues are actually three, basically. The issue of qualification or disqualification, the issue of IREF, and the issue of Federal Capital Territory. All those issues have been laid to rest in the PDP appeal. And now, the court needs not waste its time. In reality, the appeal should not have gone to the Court of Appeal. And we should not have made, I'm sorry, embarrassing display in America as we did. Because these issues are simply not issues that are so difficult to understand for a sound legal mind. IREF was not in the Constitution, was also not in the Electoral Act, as I said in one of those interviews when you invited me. If it is just a directive, it is within the prerogative of INEC, even to change it at the last minute. Nothing will happen. If, for example, it gave an undertaking that it was going to use an IREF, and then it decided maybe 2 days before that we're no longer going to use an IREF, that's within the prerogative of its authority to conduct election and to decide the mode and the manner of conducting election. What INEC cannot do is to alter the prescription of law or the provision of the Constitution. We are now talking of a situation where what particularly the Labour Party spent so much energy, so much effervescence, so much noise over. Basically irrelevancy, I'm sorry to say. And the whole media, the whole social space of the nation is taken over by an issue that is largely immaterial to the process of election.
As the court itself found, it's very telling that Justice Inyang Okoro, in reading, it is my view that there is no merit in this appeal and it is hereby dismissed. I mean, that is clear to both learned and non-learned people. That, look, it's just that the Constitution does need to be the constitutional right of all parties need to be satisfied. And you gave credit at the very top to the president, who, was stoic about all of this, never said a word, never responded, in spite of, all that was thrown his way by way of disparagement. It did show, some would say, a kind of desperation that you just couldn't fathom. But at least they pursued all those who didn't see eye to eye with INEC's declaration of the president as the winner. They were allowed and they were able to exhaust all avenues, and they can't go any further. And so everybody now has to look in a different direction, which must be the way of getting on with the job of governance now, so that the president and his team can do their job with fewer distractions.
Well, I think I had in circulation this morning a video that the former Vice President Atiku said if the Supreme Court decides against him, we will appeal to God, which is okay. So,
to the ultimate judge.
May God hear the prayers of all Nigerians for a better nation.
That video had been in circulation for a while. It wasn't upon the occasion of this judgment, but people on social media found that it was, this will fit into that particular scenario. But the Waziri Adamawa had made that statement even before, when reporters were asking speculative questions, that, look, if it comes to that, and if I don't get joy at the Supreme Court, then I will appeal to God. Indeed.
I think it was interesting. But the reality of the matter is that all over Africa, there is a need for a new thinking. The desperation, the frustration is totally unnecessary, in my view. We fight so much about election. We do so much to win, to be there. It's only one man that will be there. One man in his time And there are so many parts we can play in the development of our nation. I think we need to come to a new realization. Like I said, all of this is totally unnecessary. We condemn INEC, we condemn the nation, we condemn the courts, we do all of that simply because we want to. In other words, unless we are there, even if we are not entitled to be there, by law and by evidence, the nation will not have peace. I mean, I think we need to develop greater maturity. The political leaders of our nation. And I again want to salute the president of Nigeria for his maturity throughout this time. And I'm talking of even before the election, from February last year, constant attack, innuendos, lies, all sorts of unwarranted vituperations, so to say.
Yes.
And yet, he maintained the common touch without responding, focusing.
Common touch
on the race, on the high calling, so to say.
Indeed.
But I think leadership need to develop some maturity. A man will win. If you go into a competition, you either win or you lose. I have gone into political contests all the time, 3 times, or even 4 times. I ran for governor 3 times. I lost each time. I'm still happy, I'm still alive, I'm still functioning very well. I went for Senate once. I lost. Losing is part of life. And then all we need to focus on in our country is that let the loser lose fairly. The winner wins justly. And when we are talking of winning justly, it's according to law. Losing fairly is also according to law. So we should respect the legal institutions like INEC. Can't spend all our time condemning everything in our country.
They were condemning everything in sight. It was bordering on hatred, quite frankly, let the truth be told. But then the statesmanship of the president, as you said earlier, was remarkable in not responding to any of the verbiage. It's like, look, he was flicking it off, his shoulders, so to speak. That in itself is sort of something of a lesson for people when they come into that kind of, if they ever have the onerous responsibility of being under such a barrage of malice, quite frankly, let it be said. But good morning to you, Reverend Dominic.
Good morning, Yori, if you can hear me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr.
Go ahead, Reverend.
Yeah, Chief Yori, just like Dr. Abayomi have said this, we have said this several times on this station, that the only election since 1983 that we can call a contest was the one of 2023.
Not a word can we hear in studio. Reverend Dominic, I get the impression that you are speaking, but we can't hear a thing.
Like June 12th. No, June 12th election, there was no contest. It was like a Superman with a small boy fighting. Can you hear me, sir? Can I go on? I can't hear you at all.
Oh, okay, Reverend, can you hear me?
Little, can I go on?
Well, okay, go on.
But the network is fainting.
Okay, we're going to try and come back to you. There's a technical issue. It does sound as if your level is even below 1 in terms of 1 to 10 on the scale. But
Mr. I said another IRF means malfunctioning.
Well, while we're trying to get Reverend Dominic his sound in order, I don't know, between yesterday and today, we're talking about the president being stoic about all that went through, and now he was being congratulated yesterday. But I haven't heard yet that the parties involved haven't pursued it to the logical conclusion, have now extended their congratulations to the president. That is not quite sportsmanlike, is it?
That's where it touches on hatred, precisely. Now, we're now talking of a situation where the president has offered olive branch after he was declared president to you. Well, you decided to challenge the election. It's your constitutional right. Then you lost at the Court of Appeal, the Court of First Instance on election. Again, he extended olive branch to you. Then you went to the Supreme Court. Again, yes. He has done all of that. In spite of the fact that some of the embarrassing things shouldn't have happened. You went to America, you brought some kind of deposition and asking the court to take it in order to establish that he committed fraud for a certificate or certification.
Indeed.
Over an outstanding scholar. Something that sounds silly.
It was mind-boggling to some, Dr. Abayomi. I'm sorry to interject. It was mind-boggling to some, but at the end of the day, all of that was thrown out, and one is expecting that they would do the sportsmanly thing and indeed extend their heartfelt congratulations to the clearly decided winner of the election. But Ms. Chidi in Kafanchan, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much for calling in.
Uncle Yori, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's all right. Good morning, Dr. Abayomi.
Good morning.
I want to take this opportunity to once again congratulate the President, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, by the judgment delivered yesterday at the Supreme Court. The brickbat concerning the 2023 presidential elections has come to rest. Now, the duty that the president and his team has is governance and pure governance. As we will always say, Nigeria is having a good number of things that needs to be fixed. And President Tinubu has shown the capacity to do the fixing that we need in the areas of security, in the areas of health care delivery, in the health care of education, and so on and so forth. Therefore, he has less issues to look up to, except how to mitigate over these challenges that the country is currently having. I wish the president well. I wish Nigerians across the entire strata well. I wish the future election well. Thank you very much, Uncle Yori, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Chidi in Kafanchan, for calling.
If I may just add something, Mr. Yori, is it we spend much time focusing on the president, but I think we also have to extend our expectation for better governance of this nation to the legislative department and even to the judiciary. Governance under democracy is divided into three parts: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Particularly our legislative department. Our people are getting uncomfortable with the tendency the well-being of the electors. Because we cannot have a situation where a citizen in his daily work, in a monthly salary, will be something like 30,000, and he will have to work for, God alone knows, hundreds of years to make an annual salary of a legislator. It is not possible.
Indeed. One moment, Doctor.
Pardon,
Doctor. I got to bring in Yakubu. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Abayomi. Yakub in Dokwemo, good morning to you, sir.
Usually, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And then good morning to Dr. Abayomi. Let me begin by saying congratulations to Mr. President Ashwad Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Yes.
And then by extension to all 8 million people, 8 million plus people that are giving that vote to him. And then by extension as well, to those of people that are not giving that vote to him, but by now they were thinking that I know I'm giving my vote to this man. Now, the Supreme Court has said he won the election, and now, as he also rightly says yesterday himself, say that now is to work on. I want to say this: the station we are in now, Mr. President need a prayer, which we always did. We always done every day, and then we'll continue to do that. And then I'm very sure he knows the situation of this country as we are now, especially when it comes to inflation in terms of food and all that. And then I also want to use this opportunity to tell Mr. President to call National Assembly into order, Mr. Chief Justice, because the situation that we find ourselves at this time does not warrant the National Assembly to go and buy car worth of 160 million.
Okay.
Because they were playing with our intelligence.
All right, then. Thank you. I beg your pardon. I got to interrupt at this stage, but thank you very much for calling in. The main thing, I think, as you said, was congratulating the president and his team, and indeed all those 8 million plus voters. Dr. Abayomi, we've just about run out of time, but I think it does bear mentioning that we do expect the contestants, the fellow contestants of the president, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and Mr. Peter Gregory Obi, as sportsmen, to extend their congratulations to the president. If they don't, one just begins to imagine what kind of a president might they have made if those kind of values are not intact.
That's the mark of leadership. To be strong when you lose and be weak when you win. Okay. Leadership requires to be strong when you lose and to be weak when you win.
I think that's a fine place, that philosophical place. It's a fine place to leave it, Dr. Abayomi. I beg your pardon, we've completely run out of time, but I do thank you for your time this morning, Dr. Tunji Abayomi, constitutional lawyer.
Well, thank you very much, and happy day to Nigeria and Nigerians.
Indeed. Happy day to Nigerians. The day after, the Supreme Court pronounced that Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu is indeed the rightful president according to the declaration of INEC and the 8 million voters that made that possible. Thank you very much. That was Dr. Tunji Abayomi.